Boom. Good afternoon and welcome to episode 48 of the Jacksonian. As I'm yours truly, Jackson Johnson, and I have with me is the host of Basketball Conference, the ACC football podcast himself, Joey Weaver. And you've often seen his articles from time to time on From the Rumble Seat at SB Nation. Let me tell you something. This guy's a genius with not just Georgia Tech, but with college football on the ACC, college athletics for the ACC as well. I'm telling you right now, you're going to want to hear his takes. And we'll be going over quite a lot, like Georgia Tech season so far, what's going on with Florida State, Cal, Stanford, SMU in their first season in the ACC, the Week 3 slate, and much, much more. And I'll tell you right now, it's going to be a wild ride. How you doing today, good buddy?
Jackson, it's good to be on. I appreciate the invite and I appreciate all the kind words. I don't know if I would say, I don't know if I would use the genius word necessarily, but I certainly appreciate that. And I certainly consider myself a big fan who tries to pay attention, not only the ACC, but college football in general as much as possible.
Well, I always say what I mean. That's the thing about me. But for those who don't know enough about you, would you like to tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely, yeah. So I went to Georgia Tech, graduated in December of 2013, so a little over 10 years ago, making me feel older every word I say. But really kind of fell in love with college football while I was in school there. My freshman year was 2009. Year two of Paul Johnson. They went to the Orange Bowl. They won the ACC championship. So that was a pretty nice welcome to college kind of way to catch the fever of not only Georgia Tech football, but then kind of fell in love with the rest of the sport across the country as well. So I've lived in Houston ever since graduating. I'm in Houston, Texas. I've been I work, I've got a day job and other things I do beyond college football podcasting. But as you mentioned, I started working writing it From the Rumble Seat while I was in college. Eventually became site manager there for a number of years. And then back in 2016, me and my partner, Mike McDaniel, founded Basketball Conference, the ACC football podcast. We've never made ourselves out to be good marketers with that name, but it is a tongue-in-cheek, loving kind of thing. So get a lot of people confused as to, is it a football podcast or a basketball podcast? No, it's definitely a football podcast. But we've been doing that. We're now in our 9th season, so having a lot of fun with it, talking about all the ACC. We previewed all the teams before the season. We preview all the games every week, and we recap the games live on YouTube afterwards on Saturday nights. So been having a lot of fun with that. Been really trying to build out a community. So if you've got any interest in the ACC, whether you're a fan of one of those teams specifically or not, we'd love to have you come join us.
Oh, man. If I'm looking for some top-notch ACC analysis, you and Mike McDaniel are the guys, that's for sure.
I appreciate that. It's, it's definitely gotten tougher to cover since we started. You add 3 teams this year. You have the transfer portal where, it seems like 30% of anyone's roster is turning over every year, but still trying to have a lot of fun with it and trying to be honest about what we know and what we don't. And just again having fun with it. It's all a fun, goofy sport, so can't take it too seriously.
Nope. Well, I will say though, somebody has been having a good start to the season, especially in week 0. But unfortunately, they did lose to Syracuse and Kyle McCord, and that's the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. And I've been liking what Brent Key's been doing, and I've talked to a few friends of mine. I'm like, are we ready to compare him to Paul Johnson just yet? Because, I'll be honest, I'm loving what he's doing. He's obviously a heck of a lot better than Jeff Collins. How are you feeling about the Brent Key era thus far?
I'm definitely optimistic. I agree with you. I like the things that he's been doing. There is a good amount of turnover that he's done with both the roster as well as the coaching staff. I think kind of building that out into his own image. I see a lot of attention to detail. I see identity, especially on offense. I think he's hired a couple of really good coordinators. One being Buster Faulkner, who's probably one of the best, if not the best, play caller in the ACC at this point. You've got Tyler Santucci, who just came in this offseason. He was a Mike Elko guy. So still, still a work in progress on that side of the ball. But certainly it's like I see what Brent Key is trying to build towards. I see the ideas that he has. And I very much impressed with what he's done, 8 games as an interim, and then this is now year 2 as a full-time head coach. So I could see some comparisons to Paul Johnson, but I definitely think there are some differences too in the way that they approach things. And Brent, obviously a lot less experience than Paul had coming in. He had spent all the time at Georgia Southern and then at Navy. So Brent's still kind of a first-time head coach, still figuring some things out on the fly. But you can tell, I mean, there's some humility and there's some desire to learn and improve and change the way that he's doing things. So that's always a positive for me, is seeing someone who's willing to change up things and not just totally stuck in their ways the way that some coaches get to be.
Well, and I've been wanting to compare him to Bobby Dodd, but that's going to take like a few more years of greatness. Like,
Maybe a
that's
couple
going to take.
rings, yeah.
Oh yeah, it's like he's going to have to win the ACC quite a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. It's been interesting, so far. I think they've been recruiting at a level that I wasn't sure that I'd ever see at Georgia Tech. And then, of course, you've only got one full completed class and now working on a second that isn't fully signed. So there's still more time to build up a track record that way. But I think they have done a nice job bringing in the transfers that they've gotten in, bringing some Atlanta guys back from other schools, and places like Auburn and Michigan and Notre Dame and like some of these bigger brand programs. You can still get some good guys even if they're not playing there.
Well, and I've got the rest of the schedule pulled up, and I know that some people were saying that Notre Dame's going to be a loss for Georgia. When people talked about how many challenging games were there going to be for Notre Dame, oh, Texas A&M's going to be one. Oh, USC, Florida State, but people counted out Georgia Tech, and honestly, I think that's a dumb move, especially with the job that Brent Key's been doing at Georgia Tech. And after the season he had last year and the momentum they set themselves up with that victory over UCF, it would be unwise to be counting out the Yellow Jackets. What's the rest of the season looking like for Georgia Tech from your perspective?
It's definitely interesting to me. Coming into the season, Georgia Tech was pretty widely regarded as having one of the toughest, if not, the toughest schedule in the country. I don't know that you'd maybe go that far, but certainly one of the toughest, very much so. And I think you look at kind of some of the spots that were expected to be really tough. I mean, you had a preseason ranked NC State, you had a preseason ranked Florida State, you had Virginia.
Uh-oh, face freeze. Rats, maybe it's my connection.
And so that's kind of where things have shifted a little bit, I think, where it looked pretty impossible and, well, maybe we'll see if we can make a bowl game, that kind of thing. But what you've seen from some of the teams on this schedule so far, I think a bowl game is starting to look pretty, pretty attainable. I don't think you're as afraid of NC State as you were 3 weeks ago. I don't think you're as obviously not afraid of Florida State. You went and won that game as a double-digit underdog. You look at Virginia Tech. I mean, they've got their issues going on right now. North Carolina, certainly. Duke, I think the schedule sets up to be a little less daunting than maybe we thought it was going to be, and it presents a lot of opportunities to get some wins.
Well, and I noticed that Georgia Tech is on Black Friday this year, and I know that some people have questioned it being on Black Friday, but honestly, are you really going to win the ratings with Arkansas, Missouri? No, you're not. And plus, there's a lot of Georgia Tech games that have been featured on Thanksgiving Day. And, you look back on it, it was pretty good playing it on Thanksgiving. And I think a few of them were on Black Friday, honestly.
Yeah, most of the ones that I remember have been on that Saturday, but I know there's been a couple on Friday. So it is a change from recent years. I mean, in most times, recent years, not only has it been on that Saturday, it's been like a noon game almost every year. I think last game was a night game for the first time in, I don't know, like a decade or something, so.
Oh, yeah, 2009 on ABC when Georgia Tech was playing Georgia. And it was, if you could either watch that game on ABC, depending on your location, or is Notre Dame Stanford.
Okay, well, I was in the student section for that game, and it was not a fun watch as a Georgia Tech fan with the way that game went. But yeah, so this is definitely kind of a change of pace to do that game on Saturday night or on a Friday night as opposed to Saturday at noon.
Yeah, I mean, but 2014, I love that game because that was a tremendous game. Georgia Tech ended that losing streak, a 5-year losing streak to Georgia at that time.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and that's where you got that long Harrison Butker field goal, send it to overtime. You score a touchdown in the top half of overtime. Basically, you go to the bottom half, so you scored the touchdown and actually missed the extra point. I think it was blocked, and so you go to the bottom of the of overtime and thinking like, oh great, they're going to score a touchdown, they're going to kick an extra point, and we're going to be done here. And DJ White comes up with an interception of Hudson Mason, and you win the game. I mean, that was incredibly exciting that day.
Oh yeah, but somebody that's been having some downturns since that huge loss in Ireland is Florida State, and they're 0-2, and I don't think they're going to be anything like they were in 1989. Obviously, that's not going to happen. They got a huge game against Memphis this week, and it's basically put up or shut up time. And, some people have outright said, we felt bad for Florida State last season, but we don't feel bad for them anymore. What's your take on Florida State's 0-2 start? Where do they need to go from there? Could they have a 2010 Virginia Tech-like season, or is that a no?
I mean, it's definitely a situation where... yes, I mean, people felt bad for them. I felt bad for them. Even doing all the legal battle stuff that they were doing and how much that all bothered me. I did feel bad for them at the time last year when they were supposed to have been in the playoff and they weren't. I mean, and part of it was feeling bad for them. Part of it was feeling bad about the state of college football, if that's the decisions that we're going to be making, this year, I don't know how much anybody feels bad for him at all. Like, no. I think I'm totally okay, pointing and laughing a little bit. I think the biggest thing that they've had a problem with so far is guy we used to refer to as Big Cinco. Now we'll refer to him as Big Quattro. DJ Uiagalelei, their quarterback, he has serious issues throwing the ball. I mean, and you really saw it again in that game against Boston College where he had some wide open receivers. He's throwing it short. He's overthrowing them. I mean, just bad accuracy issues, even on wide open throws. And that's the kind of thing that, like, Mike Norvell, I think, is one of the better offensive coaches in the game. He's a really good play caller, schemer, all that stuff. But at the end of the day, that's not going to matter if DJU can't hit the easy stuff that's schemed open for him, right? And you can't build a run game without any threat of a downfield passing game. Like, you at least have to have some sort of play action going to get that offense going. They can't do it right now. And so really, to me, if Florida State is going to get this thing on the rails, it's going to be one of two things. It's either number one, DJU figures out this accuracy thing, gets over the yips or whatever it is that's going on with him and that accuracy. And by the way, not that different from what we saw towards the end of his Clemson tenure. So I don't know that this is just like a short-term thing. This might just be who he is as a quarterback these days. So either figure that out and fix it, or we need to be talking about Brock Glenn or someone else that we can use as quarterback there, because just fundamentally, if you cannot have any sort of a functional passing game here, you can't have an offense. Like, you have to have something. That run game is not going to be able to stand on its own without something in the passing game. So I think that's the biggest thing they got to figure out. And if they can't figure it out, they're going to miss a bowl game. Like, what they've been doing, I mean, almost anyone can beat them. And that defense a little bit flawed as well, with kind of some young linebackers and that defensive line underperforming a little bit. You wonder about culture and potential quitting, like some of that stuff. Like, they need to right the ship and fast. Otherwise, I think this thing very much could totally spiral out of control for them.
Yeah, and I know there was like one or two people. I know a buddy of mine was saying that there's a bad culture at Florida State, especially since the Orange Bowl last season. And I wish those guys had stuck it out. honestly, because it looks good on your pro record. It looks good on your draft stock. It looks good for your future, everything. Like you can't just quit when things are tough. I mean, I don't like it either, but I mean, there's things that I've dealt with in life that I'm not too crazy about, but I didn't sit and quit and go, oh, well, it's too tough. It's like,
Yeah.
and you've done, I'm sure you've done that. You're like, yeah, there's things too tough, but I'm not going to quit.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean that's it, and I don't know if it's a too tough kind of thing as much as like business decisions kind of thing. And
Right.
definitely postseason participation is something that this
True.
sport has to figure out because I mean this has been happening left and right in bowl games everywhere, and it's only easier when you're basically being told winning and losing doesn't matter, and you still see I mean 8 or 9 guys got drafted off that team,
Oh,
and
yeah.
so it's like you kind of understand it from that standpoint, but it doesn't make it any
True.
better from like a TV watching standpoint.
No. Good. Yeah, it's just looking pretty disastrous for the Seminoles, and honestly, they're not even in conference play for the conference title game right now. It's like they're going to need a lot of help,
Hmm.
and right now, I would say they're closer to having a drink at the Long Branch with Miss Kitty than they are getting to the ACC title game. That's how bad things are.
I would agree. I mean, I think they've got to run the table in the ACC to even give themselves a shot at Charlotte. And I mean that includes beating Clemson when they come to town. That includes going to Miami and winning that game. I do not know that that's going to be able to happen for them. So time will tell, but not looking good so far for the Noles.
No. And the way things look, they may just put Florida State on the CW right after the latest Supernatural rerun.
They might, yeah. I mean, that might be 2 teams playing for bowl eligibility at that point or something. I mean, which really bizarre to see that between Florida and Florida State, but that's where we're at right now.
It's just disastrous.
Hmm.
And I know that Norvell has a huge buyout, so he's got to be fine. But that didn't stop Jimbo Fisher from getting fired last year. So
Yeah,
I've pretty much have been like, since Fisher got fired last year, no coach is safe from a huge buyout.
that's true. I don't know that the pockets are quite as deep at Florida State as they are at Texas A&M, but still, I'm kind of with you that for Florida State trying to be the kind of program that they're trying to be, I mean, I think that, yeah, like they'll pay whatever they have to if that's what they got to do. But I don't know that they're out on Jimbo. I don't know that they're out on Norvell yet. So we'll I don't know. We'll see as things kind of continue to develop. You got 10 games ahead of them, and they need to figure out a way to go 6-4 across them.
That's true, because I mean, if they want to show that things are looking up for 2025, now's a good time. Because I mean, they may just have to salvage one or two things for 2024, but that's it. But I'm looking at some of the teams for the ACC, and any shot that Wilcox was on the hot seat, I kind of think he got off it with that Cal victory over Auburn last week, unless they lose to San Diego State on ACC after dark. So I mean, it's Cal's kind of a weird team,
Mm-hmm.
and I know Pat Narduzzi was looked at as a possible hot seat coach, but I think if anything, he's gonna get off it. It's just one bad year on the road. It happens,
Yeah.
and as we've seen in Pittsburgh, dreams go to die at Pitt.
I mean, Narduzzi's another one that has a really large buyout, and some of me, I wonder over the years, kind of watching Pittsburgh, like what is the level of ambition there for their program? They seem like they're okay winning 8 to 9 games a year and just kind of cruising and being one of the better teams in the ACC. Like that's totally fine for them. So at that point, is Narduzzi really not meeting expectations? They had a bad year last year, but jury's still out, I think, on this year. The interesting note there, by the way, is they just fired the AD at Pittsburgh, I think maybe Tuesday or something,
Oh yeah,
Monday. And so
yeah,
that always becomes a thing where you got a new boss and they're not the ones that hired you. And it becomes a little easier, I think, to make that move when those things happen. But again, it seems like he's got a lot of support around that building. So I don't know that he's necessarily on the hot seat. I look around the ACC, and I mean, it's like we just turned over a handful of jobs. It seems like Virginia really wants to keep Tony Elliott around. I really have a hard time seeing Miami firing Mario Cristobal if things were to go south this year. Um, I don't know, and very much a thing where you figure that two or three of these guys are going to be on the hot seat or are going to move jobs at any given year, but like just this year and the jobs that have turned over and kind of where everything else is at, this might be a really quiet year for the coaching carousel for the ACC. In a way, I would be a little bit surprised if there's more than like one or two jobs that turn over, barring things like, Mac Brown retires or, Dave Clawson decides he doesn't want to do NIL anymore and just hangs him up or, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the only coaching change I can really see in the ACC is Matt Brown retiring. And I've got a coaching candidate in mind for North Carolina, Jamie Chadwell from Liberty.
Sure.
Because
I mean, he did real well in the Carolina area, right?
Oh yeah, and he lives in Virginia as of now, so it's like it's like come on in to Chapel Hill.
That's a guy with his offense that, as an opposing ACC fan, I would not be excited about them hiring Jamie Chadwell because not fun playing defense against, the offenses that he runs.
What about like Dave Doreen? Like, because I don't think he should be, but I do know that the guy that he replaced in 2012, Tom O'Brien, got fired for not doing a good enough job. Like bowl eligibility was not enough in Raleigh. They want that ACC title at some point. That they won't be able to get in as an at-large team in the playoffs at the very least.
Yeah. Yeah, another guy that I think it has to go pretty bad for him to be in any sort of danger here. I mean, I had a thing on our podcast maybe 3 years ago, I think maybe coming out of COVID, that I was saying basically I think that they could or should move on here. Basically, they had gone through a cycle where they had some two teams that were extremely talented and never really got past 9 wins, and they never played a New Year's Six bowl game and any of those things. And I just said, like, man, that's as good as you're ever going to get, and that's the highest peak he could get you to. Like, might be time to move on. And they didn't, and sure enough, they were right back at like 8-9 wins in 2021, if memory serves. So that's that's a situation too. I don't think that they want to get rid of him. What's the ambition level? What's it ever been at NC State? I agree that they want to win a conference title, but you really got to start doing odds in your head on like, who else are we going to get that's going to give us a better chance at that?
That's true. I mean, you got to look at the odds, no doubt about that.
Mm-hmm.
But speaking of odds, there's the week 3 slate for the ACC. And we talked a little bit about Florida State, Memphis. That's going to be a good game.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a game that really doesn't get any respect in any way. Boston College, Missouri.
Mm-hmm.
If Boston College wins this game, it'd be humongous for the ACC. And it would look like you got an at-large team because, of course, the conference champion's getting in. But I'm going to keep it $1.50. It looks like it's going to be tough for an at-large team to get in. Not saying we won't see it. I'm saying it looks tougher for right now.
Out of the ACC?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a big opportunity for Boston College, and that's a really tough game. I mean, if memory serves, Missouri, I think, has not allowed a point yet this year on defense. I think they've thrown 2 shutouts or close to it.
Oh, they have.
They were a really good team.
One of 2 teams in college football so far. The other one's Purdue.
And what, have they only played 1 game or something?
Yeah, they played Indiana State.
Yeah.
They said it like it was something that Albert Einstein built or something.
Yeah, I mean, this is a really tough spot for Boston College going on the road against a very good Missouri program, and a team that I think won was it the Sugar Bowl or the Cotton Bowl last year? They played Ohio State and beat them.
Yes, it
Very
was the Cotton Bowl.
Yeah, very good program. So that's going to be a tough game for Boston College. You know, they've looked good so far. Obviously, they beat up on Florida State there on Labor Day night, and they looked good, kind of taking care of business last weekend. So this is going to be a really good test, and I'm curious to see how they do.
Yeah, I want to see if Boston College can beat the spread or better yet pull off that upset. Because I mean, the odds were against them against Florida State on the road, and some people are like, "Oh, well, they can't do it against Missouri." Yeah, well, they heard that same thing against Florida State, and plus, this week is a sloppy week in college football, so that means upsets are coming, kind of
Hmm.
like how winter is coming on Game of Thrones.
Yep. That's right. That's right. Yeah. Well, and keep in mind, I mean, these two teams have only ever played one time. That was 3 years ago in Boston, and Boston College won that game by a touchdown. So, you know, it's as much as you might think it's an unthinkable thing. I mean, it's happened before.
Oh yeah. And then there's the backyard brawl, which I'm very happy to say is still going on for another couple years. And it looks like they may be bringing it back 2026, 2027, 2028. I know they're having it for another 4 years from 2029 to 2032. But Coach Brown has said he wants it to be an annual matchup. And
Same.
thank you, Lord. Now let's bring back Penn State, Pittsburgh, Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, and Florida, Miami on an annual basis, and a
There
few
you
more
go.
others.
That's what we need more of in college football. Those regional rivalries. That's for sure. Yeah, very interesting spot for Pittsburgh. You know, a team they looked really bad, honestly, last year in Morgantown when they went in and lost that game. I think it was 17-6 was the final score.
Yep.
I think Phil Dracovic threw for under 100 yards and had 3 interceptions, and I mean just a total mess. But you know, you've got a new quarterback, you've got a new offense entirely here. They're coming into your building now. Small home dog, like feels like a decent spot for Pitt to get a big win here and in a rivalry game and to really kind of make sure that their season is on the right path here. Where you know they've gotten 2 wins already, but man, if you're 3-0, I think they've got a Youngstown State or something next week. You know, so fun fact that has come up every year as we preview teams in the ACC that I can never believe that this is true, but it is. Pittsburgh has never, in the history of its program, they have never gone 4-0 out of conference in a given season. They have never done it. So if you win this game, you got Youngstown State next week. You are sitting pretty to finally, at long last, break that streak. So
There we go.
big game for the Panthers here.
You know, College Football Nation, it's not too late to talk Youngstown State and Kent State to move out of their slots and get Pittsburgh, Penn State to reunite against one another. Penn State says they're unrivaled, but they're really not.
Kind of need to decide that on the field, in my opinion, but, you know, to each their own.
Oh, yeah. And, you know, there's Duke, UConn, and Virginia Tech, Old Dominion. You know, Virginia Tech's never, get away from me, Ad. Virginia Tech's never beaten Old Dominion at Norfolk, Virginia. I'm wondering if this year can change.
Well, for Brent Pry's sake, hopefully it does, because that would be a pretty tough look to go in and lose that game, fall to 1-2, having lost. It would be losing twice as a double-digit favorite early in the game. But as you mentioned, I mean, they have not played well in Norfolk when they've had the chance. So we'll see if they can right that ship.
Oh, yeah. Well, and we see the CW game, and we see an old rivalry with Maryland, Virginia. So that's pretty cool. And we mentioned a little bit about the ACC After Dark game.
Yep. Yeah, the old ACC rivalry there will be fun to watch. Interesting spread here, I think. Kind of surprised that this is only 2.5. You know, I would have thought it'd be a little larger than that. So maybe Vegas knows something, and we're in for a mild upset in this spot, and Virginia getting revenge on the old ACC defector Maryland there.
Well, I'm just going to go ahead and bet the spread on Old Dominion, Wake Forest, and Pittsburgh.
You can take Wake against Ole Miss at your own risk. Man, Ole Miss has been
CW curse, and sloppy week.
I'm with you, and I'm almost always just a CW underdogs, just a fiend there. But Man, Ole Miss has been tearing people limb from limb so far this year and just taking no prisoners. And
Well, they've gone against pitiful teams. They haven't gone against top-notch teams in all college football. They always fall apart with Georgia and LSU and Baton Rouge and Alabama. They don't do well against those teams. They're like the Penn State of the SEC.
that's a good comparison. That's a good comparison. But I mean, keep in mind who they're playing this weekend is not Georgia or LSU or
That's true.
Penn State. That's a Wake Forest problem. That's a Wake Forest problem. A Wake Forest team that has had its own problems. Especially defensively and such. I mean, I don't know, man. Like it's.
They have lost to Virginia last week on ESPN2.
Yeah, well, and I get the same feeling coming into this game that I got going into NC State Tennessee last week, where I was like, I didn't expect a 41-point game, in that spot, but I had a feeling that NC State was not going to be able to keep up with Tennessee at all, and I get that same feeling about Wake Forest. I don't think they're going to be able to keep up with Ole Miss in any meaningful way. So if it were me and betting my money, I would be betting on Ole Miss.
Yeah. I mean, Ole Miss will win, no doubt about it, but it's just, I just feel like there's going to be like a bad beat somewhere on that game, and it's going to be on Scott Van Pelt, and it's going to go.
That's right. That's right.
Oh, yep. Man.
I can see it now on Monday night.
There we go. That'll be fun. And, we're looking at the rest of the 2024 season for the ACC. What's something you're hoping to see that you're not seeing, and who's looking like the most likely at-large team?
Most likely at-large team. I mean, Clemson gets helped out. So my pick on the podcast, I had Miami winning the ACC over Clemson. Nice. And trust me when I say that I do not take picking Miami to win the ACC lightly. That is something that I have avoided for years and years, but it just feels like this is their year. And so we'll see. It's been good so far, but can you avoid any sort of hiccups or upsets down the road? We'll see. By that logic, I mean, I think Clemson has the brand to get, the at-large spot from the ACC, but I mean, the more projections that I look at, and I look at the top 10 or 12 teams in the country, and you start really having to come to terms with the fact that, like, I mean, this is probably going to be 4 conference champions, Notre Dame, a G5 conference champion, and like 6 teams from the SEC and the Big Ten. I mean, it's clearly like that's kind of what they're setting it up for, and what TV wants, and if Clemson and Florida State are not able to be in that kind of realm to take an at-large bid at that point, I'm not sure the ACC has anyone else who is quite at that level who's going to be able to ascend to like a fringe top 10 team kind of position where the committee's going to have no choice but to put them in. I don't see that happening with anyone else. So we will see about that.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing what's going to happen, and I want to see Georgia Tech surprise a lot of people again, like they did with Florida State. I mean,
me too. Hopefully in a good way.
Well, I talked with Locked On ACC co-host and Locked On Canes host Alex Dono, where I'm like, I want to see Georgia Tech in that losing streak against Georgia. I got a feeling they'll do it under Brent Key, but it's not a matter of if, but when.
We'll see. They've played very close games against Georgia, the 2 that they've played under Brent Key, and pretty massively outperformed the spread each time. I want to say that they were like 20-point underdogs in both those games, and I think they were both roughly 1-score situations. And there's some context there of, Georgia maybe potentially sitting guys out, preparing for the SEC championship game, trying to get healthy, that kind of thing. But at the end of the day, the scoreboard says what it does, and Tech has played them relatively closely the last couple of years. So I question a little bit if we'll ever see it. Just Kirby has such a machine absolutely running in Athens, as much as it pains me to say that. But I wouldn't rule it out. I mean, I feel a lot better about those games than I did under the previous administration. So,
yeah, I mean, it's not like you're going against the Mark Rick era now, because it's like you're going against the Kirby Smart era, which, I mean, we're obviously going to see a few more national titles in Athens for sure.
Hope not.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, it's no longer a machine that's kind of flawed like you saw under Mark Richt. It's the Death Star that you're looking for the exhaust port. Like, and it's a different calculation at that point of how you go in there and beat them. You know, when again they've won 40 some straight regular season games. I mean, it's a pretty bonkers streak that they're on.
Oh yeah. And as we reach the last call, and for that, what are your final thoughts, and where can people find you for those who want to get their fits on Georgia Tech athletics and ACC athletics?
Absolutely. Well, you know, I appreciate you having me on here, Jackson. It does shape up to be a very fun ACC season in a very ACC way. I think, you know, a lot of teams that are around the same quality, and there's going to be some crazy games, some wacky upsets that'll happen in there. So just, you know, excited to be covering it all again. And, you know, again, year 9 on the podcast, we're having a lot of fun with it so far. So, you know, definitely go find us, youtube.com/@the-ACC football podcast. If you're watching on YouTube right now, you can kind of see the link right down there at the bottom of the screen. We're on Twitter. We're on Instagram. I'm still calling it Twitter, by the way. So just, you know where it is. BC Podcast, ACC on all the socials. So go find us. And I'm a Georgia Tech fan. My co-host is a Virginia Tech fan, but you know, we talk about the whole conference. We cater to the whole conference. We got a good Virginia contingent. We've got a good Miami contingent. A lot of different teams that, you know, have fans that come join us to join in all the fun. So come find us, come join us. We'd appreciate that. And, you know, hopefully you enjoyed it as much as we do.
Well, you can also check out Joey on these links on X and on Muckrack and on Blue Sky Social. I'm going to have to learn a little bit about Blue Sky for sure. But of course, and let's get Joey and Mike over to 500 subs. Let's get them over to 1,000 before the end of the year on their podcast. We've got to get them there. And of course, I'm looking to get to 500 subs, as I am 132 subs away from that magic number right here on YouTube at Jackson Johnson 979. And you can also find me on Jackson VOCFB on X and on Instagram and Threads, Jackson Johnson 543908. And tune in every Monday afternoon, 5 p.m. Central Time, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, for Crimson Tide Live on Alabama at the Voice of College Football, where Johnny Burtz and I go over the latest news and notes on the Alabama Crimson Tide, including this week's episode for Wisconsin Week, where we had Ryan Herrings from Locked On Badgers discussing his take on the upcoming matchup on Saturday on Bid Noon Kickoff. And for that, I wish you all a happy weekend, and to stay safe, stay cool, stay away from the heat, or in some cases, stay away from that storm. Stay inside as much as possible. I'll see y'all later.